straight from the headlines, U.S. lawmakers worry the lower 48 could be flooded with high-grade Canadian bud if our northern neighbor decides to decriminalize. In D.C., attorney Keith Strope, he's the founder of the pro-pot group NORML. Also, criminal defense attorney David Evans with the Institute on Global Drug Policy. And on the phone in Montreal, Boris St. Maurice with Canada's Marijuana Party. Boris, first, let me ask you, the proposal is to decriminalize small amounts for personal use. What's the deal?
I believe they're going to propose to to remove the criminal sanctions that go with simple possession and replace it with fines. They call it decriminalization, but I would actually call it depenalization because it's still a criminal context, but we're eliminating the criminal penalties.
It's more like a traffic ticket now, right?
Yes, and I believe there are several states in the United States that have similar provisions, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, well, what is the likelihood this is going to pass nationwide?
Well, I was an eternal pessimist, actually, because whenever I hear a promise from a politician, well, forgive me for being skeptical, but that's been known to happen. The rumors are, though, that they are drafting legislation, and they seem quite serious about it, and the more we hear and the more they bang on the drum, the harder it is for them to back away from it. So when the Prime Minister got up recently and announced it at a huge fundraiser, that made it real. Yeah, so I think it's really coming.
Okay, so the Prime Minister has come out and supported this. Is there an organized resistance?
Strangely enough, the Marijuana Party is the resistance because we're fearful that decriminalization is going to increase. We're going to see an increase in simple users for simple possession being targeted. Because the day the state realizes there's money to be made writing tickets and collecting fines, they will increase the number of users that are going to be targeted. So I'm worried that this is actually, could have a lot more perverted effects than we had before Prohibition.
It's sort of like the speed traps. I can tell you where all the Texas speed traps are.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let me ask Keith about this. For your party, your position, the NORML movement, good news or bad?
Oh, it's very good news, both for Canada, where they have about 40,000 marijuana smokers arrested every year, who won't be arrested under this new policy. But more importantly, really, is it's going to have an enormous impact on the decriminalization movement in the U.S. It's going to be very hard for our government to continue to insist on arresting responsible marijuana smokers in the U.S. when they can look across the border and see that it works perfectly fine in Canada. And if I might real quickly, Catherine, there are in fact 12 states in the United States that already have policies precisely identical to what Canada is about to adopt, and they work very well. So this whole idea that the Bush administration is claiming the sky's going to fall is kind of silly. Ohio has a law just like Canada's about to adopt, and I don't think they've had any problems in Ohio.
Okay, David, you don't agree?
No, I don't. I think this is an example of reefer madness. I think that...
You really think there's such a thing as reefer madness?
In this case, there is, absolutely.
Hey, you were born way too late to remember the 30s.
No.
Okay, go ahead.
But, what this is going to result in is a message going to Canadian young people that marijuana is a safe drug. It's not dangerous, nothing to worry about. The Canadian House of Commons already acknowledges that Canadian kids have one of the highest rates of marijuana use in the world, according to one of their reports. The United States is concerned because it's going to mean that more marijuana is coming into the United States. In the last few years, the metric tons of marijuana, high-grade Canadian, British Columbia gold, coming to the United States has increased by about 10 times. So we're concerned about that. We don't want more marijuana in our country.
Hold on a minute. Let's take this one at a time. Oh, sure, more time. But, David, you say that it's going to tell kids by decriminalizing, they're still fine, that this is not a dangerous drug. Well, alcohol is many more times dangerous than marijuana, and yet we certainly send them that message with alcohol.
Well, according to Columbia University, the #1 drug that kids are in treatment for in the United States is marijuana, 48%. Alcohol comes in at about 19%. So for young people, it's not true that is the case.
I got to see that study. You're going to show me
I'd be happy to give it to you, but it's done by Joseph Califano, who was the head of HHS for Human Services, and that was done right here in New York City. So it is a dangerous drug. And the states that have done this in the United States are among the states that have the highest incidence of drug use and drug addiction in our country.
David, you are absolutely wrong. The United States government has done several surveys to measure drug use patterns in the states that have stopped arresting smokers in this country and compared them with neighboring states where they still arrest smokers. There's not one iota of difference. There's no increase in usage. And it's about time you stop this reefer madness trying to scare people into arresting marijuana smokers. We had 724,000 Americans arrested last year on marijuana charges. 89% of those people were arrested for simple possession. We are needlessly destroying the lives and careers of genuinely good citizens for no good reason.
Now, why, David, obviously I would support the decriminalization. I've been real open about this. Why in the world we're spending the kind of money we are to lock up people who are smoking marijuana just boggles my mind.
Well, we're not locking them up. I mean, I've been a criminal defense
attorney. We're doing both.
For a quarter century.
Some of them get out on probation. A lot of them are locked up.
Possession of small amounts of marijuana, people don't go to jail.
You're wrong,
honey,
David.
Wait a minute. Hold on. Honey, let me say something. I know people who are in jail right now serving life sentences for possessing barely more than 4 ounces. I know people in wheelchairs that are serving life sentences.
Well, I don't know
for possessing
For small amounts of marijuana, people are getting life sentences in the United States.
You are damn straight. That has happened over the last decade. Well,
they usually there are probably people that have committed other offenses, and maybe this was their third offense.
I've got the history
for
of these
people.
Barely more than 4 ounces, which puts it into a felony category.
And I would like to know the details on that.
Yeah,
David,
well, go down south.
David, I would like to ask you if you're unaware that alcohol kills over 50,000 lives a year in this
tobacco
country.
over 450.
Tobacco over 450. They're both legal. Marijuana has never killed a person in the history of mankind. So why don't you back off of those exaggerated claims? Nobody believes you.
Well, plenty of people believe me, Keith, and you had a very bad year in trying to get the marijuana laws liberalized in the United States. State after state has turned you down, including the state of Ohio that you just mentioned.
No, that's not true.
Because people have gotten the message. Columbia, Missouri just defeated a medical marijuana initiative, and you're not having good luck.
Okay, let David respond.
It didn't work.
David. I'm sorry, not David. Keith, you want to respond?
Well, what I would say to David is it's true that this is a struggle to deal with marijuana policy in a rational manner. But what I would also point out that there are 21 countries in the European Union. In only 4 countries do they still arrest marijuana smokers. And without question, Canada is going to decriminalize marijuana, and within 5 years, you're going to have that policy all across the U.S.
Yeah, well, even our great buddy Tony Blair has said, what in the world are we arresting these guys for?
And they quit arresting them in Canada.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, in England.
Judge Cryer, if I may interject, yes, I think that what's scariest is that the rest of the world is going in a direction following Canada's lead right now, and I fear that politically the U.S. will be standing alone in a very short time on its drug policy and marijuana specifically. Europe is light years ahead of Canada, and they've already, there's a tremendous amount of discussion there to scrap the UN conventions on psychotropic substances.
Yeah.
I think the U.S. has to ask itself, of people in the United States, a serious question. Do they want to be caught catching up, or do they want to be, on the cutting edge of social policy? And unfortunately, the U.S., which is the one that has been pretty much selling prohibition to the entire world for so long, if they had a lower rate of drug use within their population, perhaps the rest of the world would be more receptive to those policies.
Yeah. And before we go, David, let me ask you about one quote. I did an interview with Herb Kleber, who was number 2 at the time to Bill Bennett, and then interviewed Bill. And I asked Herb, I said, is marijuana any more dangerous to an adult than alcohol or tobacco? And he said no. Now, when I asked the same question to Bill Bennett, he said he's right. And then Bill looked, and I've got this in writing. Bill went, but the THC levels are higher. And then he went back to the kids. We got to worry about our kids. We worry about our kids drinking too much beer.
Or but gambling too much.
I don't quite follow the logic here. That
the point is, if we had as many
marijuana users as we have tobacco and alcohol users, we would have a lot more problems in the United States. If you legalize it, you're going to get that. Okay?
That's the last word. That's the last word. Boris St. Maurice, Keith Strum, and David Evans. Thank you all. 13th Juror next.